Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves in Paris. Which Wolves players are playing the biggest role for their team through the first game of group play at the Olympics? We'll also talk about some ownership news, and one of the Timberwolves offseason moves was mentioned by ESPN as the best in the league, or at least an executive told ESPN he thought it was the best move in the league this offseason. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Happy Tuesday, everybody. And if you're watching on YouTube, could be Monday night. We've started to post our YouTube videos the evening before. So if you watch on YouTube, you'll get the content a little bit earlier. And otherwise, you'll bright and early on Tuesday, we get the audio posted. So today we're going to cover the Olympics. We're going to talk about the first couple of days of the Olympics. Yesterday's show, Monday's show, was all about we did the post-game pod for Team USA. So I focus exclusively on Team USA. I want to look at the rest of the Olympics, other Wolves in the Olympics today. We'll also talk some ownership stuff, and we'll talk some ESPN best and worst moves of the offseason, or at least what NBA executives and coaches told ESPN they thought the best and worst moves are or have been to this point. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. A big thank you off the top for making the show your first listen every day. Of course, you can find it everywhere. That includes YouTube, as I mentioned. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So Team USA, of course, on Sunday defeated Serbia and, is now tied for the lead in the group with South Sudan. South Sudan beat Puerto Rico. And, Serbia probably will advance. Serbia is going to beat Puerto Rico, probably will beat South Sudan, should beat South Sudan. And Team USA, of course, should beat both South Sudan and Puerto Rico. But remember, the way that this works is the top two teams from each group advance, as well as the two best third place teams. So all the fourth place teams are eliminated, and the worst of the three third place teams are eliminated as well. So Team USA obviously should advance out of this. It would be a disaster if they didn't. But that's how that works. Of course, head-to-head tiebreakers are first, and then the point differential tiebreaker that I mentioned on yesterday's show as well. So it should be USA and Serbia advancing. There's definitely a shot that South Sudan could advance as well. In terms of the other groups and what happened over the first two games, or first 2 days, I should say. So the other two groups played Saturday. Group C played Sunday, and then Monday is, I think, just women's playing there at the arena. And then Tuesday, there's more group play, and then Wednesday is when Group C plays again, which is Team USA. So Team USA plays South Sudan on Wednesday. So other stuff from the weekend, and I think this all happened Saturday, actually. The Canada beat Canada beat Greece. I saw the tail end of that game. And, of course, Nickeil Alexander-Walker playing for Canada. And he's a big part of what they're doing from a rotation standpoint. He's obviously not a big factor offensively for them. He plays a similar role for Canada as he does for the Timberwolves. Just kind of spacing the floor, crashing the glass. We saw him be more effective doing that in the playoffs as well. Just trying to be active, be available. He's not going to be asked to do a whole lot with the ball in his hands, given the amount of talent that's on Canada. Remember, that entire roster is either currently or was in the NBA. So, and Andrew Wiggins isn't playing for Team Canada. So it's just a stacked team, and they should win that group. And then, of course, Group A, of course, is the best group with Canada, with Giannis and Greece. You've got Australia, which is stocked with NBA talent as well. And then Spain, who's always very good, even if they're not quite as good as they used to be, they're still going to be extremely good in the Olympics on the international stage. So that's a group where Greece probably is the odd team out, but all four of those teams, if you spread them around differently, like they should have a shot to advance. I mean, any of those teams would be certainly the third best team in Group C with Team USA and Serbia. Many of them, I would put, I don't have the world rankings in front of me, but I mean, I think Spain is ranked ahead of Serbia in the world still. Certainly Canada would be. And Australia and Greece are always good, especially Australia. So anyway, Canada beat Greece, and then Australia beat Spain. Australia has Joe Ingles on it. He did not play very much for them. I was a little bit surprised by that. But again, it's a deep enough team that he's basically like a 10th man for them. I mean, they've got a ton of NBA players like Patty Mills, obviously, of course, Josh Giddey, and then some other guys too, like Matthew Dellavedova, Dante Exum, Josh Green is on the team, Dyson Daniels. Like it's a bunch of NBA caliber or currently in the NBA talent. And Joe Ingles is at his age, he's just kind of a space the floor type guy at the end of their rotation that can come in and play solid minutes. So I don't know how much he's going to play moving forward. I don't think he's going to be a massive presence for them, but you've got Joe Ingles in Australia. You've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker in Canada, both at 1-0 in their group. And of course, they'll play each other later this week. Greece and Spain, both 0-1. And then you've got Group B. France is the favorites there. They're 1-0 so far. You've got Germany is at 1-0, and then Brazil and Japan have each lost. Gobert and France beat Brazil, who is I believe outside of Japan, I think they're the second lowest world ranking of anybody in the tournament. I believe. And there's a handful of NBA players on Brazil. They're always decent, but again, not where they were even a few years ago. It was a competitive game. France ultimately won, and Gobert and Wembanyama were, of course, really good. Gobert didn't do a whole lot offensively, which was what you'd expect. He had, I think, just one bucket at halftime of the game, but France ended up winning fairly easily. I think, they won by 12. Yeah, Gobert was good. He had 7 points, 3 boards, had a couple of blocks, played 18 minutes for them. So interested to see what France's rotation looks like. I didn't get to watch that game, so I'm curious to see, to watch them moving forward and see what the Gobert, Wembanyama, how they stagger those guys. But all 4 Timberwolves players are 1-0 in international play or in the Olympics so far. France 1-0, Australia 1-0, Canada 1-0, and Team USA 1-0. So Team USA has South Sudan Wednesday. We talked a lot. If you missed Monday's show, it was basically just a post-game pod all about Anthony Edwards and Team USA. We talked a lot about Kevin Durant's impressive performance off the bench, LeBron being fantastic, and Steph Curry's overall gravity as an offensive player, really impacting the game, even without scoring a ton. I mean, he only had 11 points in the game, didn't crack double digits until he hit a 3 with 1 second left in the game, a meaningless 3. I shouldn't say meaningless. The point differential matters. But in terms of the outcome of the game. So that's what we did on Monday's show. And of course, I'm going to continue to follow this. So like on Wednesday's show, we'll talk about what Tuesday looked like in Olympic play, because there will be the other groups will be in action, the non-USA groups. And then we'll also on Wednesday preview Team USA South Sudan. Remember, those teams played a competitive friendly. It was a close game until LeBron took over in the 4th. And so we'll talk a little bit about South Sudan's roster, what to look out for. We'll talk about what happened when those guys played each other a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago or so in the exhibition. So all that will be on Wednesday's show. Next, what I want to do today, I want to talk about the best and worst NBA offseason moves. According to this ESPN Insider article, they interviewed, I think it's 18 NBA coaches, executives, et cetera, to talk about best and worst moves of the offseason. The Timberwolves are mentioned as one of the best, but somebody said it was the best move of the offseason, that the Timberwolves made the best move of the offseason. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll close with a bit of an update on the ownership situation. We thought we'd get some movement in July, and now all we know in July is that they've set an arbitration date for later, actually in the middle of the basketball season. So we'll talk about all of that upcoming here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can get tickets to anywhere, too. It's not just baseball, and it's not just sports either. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for all sports, plus concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, with their flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. You can also get a view from your seat, a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. They also have a lowest price guarantee. If you think you find a better price elsewhere, Game Time instead will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Shifting gears, let's talk a little bit about the best and worst moves of the offseason so far. This is an ESPN article by Tim Bontemps. It's an insider article. And he says ESPN has had the chance to chat with 18 NBA coaches, scouts, and executives. He doesn't say like what the divide, like what the split is there. Like, was it 6 of each? Was it, 12 coaches and 6 scouts and 2 executives? We don't know. That math didn't work, but you know what I mean? 12, 4, and 2. There you go. So he also doesn't say that like coaches or executives or scouts couldn't vote for their own team, which is interesting. But anyway, so we'll go through it here. And there is a Wolves mention. In terms of the best offseason in the NBA, 8 of them said the Philadelphia 76ers. Not surprising. I was a little surprised that they got 8 votes. The Knicks only got 5. And the Thunder only got 3 votes. That really shocked me. Now, the Sixers did a ton. They completely redid their roster. They added, bit players like Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond and Eric Gordon and Caleb Martin are going to be more impactful, I think, to the rotation. But I don't know. Like, I get the Paul George edition. That's a big deal. And actually, here's a quote from a West executive. It says here, as one West executive put it, Philadelphia deserved the honor of number 1 for landing George because, quote, especially because of what it could have looked like if the Sixers were left with all the cap space and no star to spend it on, right? Because we'd all be laughing at the Sixers. They would have had the worst offseason of anybody in the NBA if they didn't fill that spot or if they didn't fill that cap space with a star player, because that was the goal all along. They had all those expiring deals. And like Paul George may be the best player to change teams this offseason. Mikal Bridges obviously is in the conversation. In a second, I'll talk about OKC, but I think the Caruso addition is more impactful. I would go with OKC having the best offseason, and I would even take the Knicks ahead of the Sixers. Now, the Knicks gave up a ton to get Mikal Bridges, but the Knicks should be very, very good once again this year. I'm just, at this point in Paul George's career, I just don't know what sort of regular impact he's going to have, like how often he's going to be on the floor healthy. And, he's been very good when he's been on the floor and healthy, but I don't know. I think giving them the award simply because if they hadn't done it, it would have been a disappointing offseason seems funny. Not an award, but, saying they have the best offseason. So I would go Thunder, Knicks, Sixers. Celtics got 2 votes for this, which I thought was interesting. They did some stuff toward the end of the free agency period. But OKC, I think adding Alex Caruso and Hartenstein as well, like that's a really nice offseason for the OKC Thunder. They needed rebounding and a little bit of interior defense. Hartenstein gives you that. They needed perimeter defense. Alex Caruso gives you that. They needed some toughness. They needed some more outside shooting. Those guys do all of those things. They answer all of those questions for OKC. And we're talking about a team that had the number 1 seed last year in the Western Conference. And the West didn't get any easier other than Denver maybe getting a little bit worse. We'll get to that in a second. And the Clippers getting worse. But I mean, Memphis will be better than they were last year. The Timberwolves should be the same, but better if you include Ants. If you assume Ants going to continue to ascend and they maintain relative health, Phoenix changed the coach up and should be better than they were last year, frankly. Wembanyama and the Spurs are coming. And by the way, Denver may have gotten a little worse, but they still have the best player in the league. So they're not going anywhere. All that to say, I think OKC's offseason to me was the best of anybody. You could talk Sixers, you could talk Knicks. The Celtics, I think, 4th, fine for them. But, for me, it's more Thunder, Knicks, Sixers is how I would rank it. All right, the NBA's worst offseason. This was split up a bit more. Denver got 6 votes. The Bulls got 5. The Clippers got 4. And then 1 each for the Lakers, Knicks, which I thought was interesting, and the Pistons. It says, I'll read what he says here, what Bontemps has written. It says, surprisingly, an East scout said the Knicks had the league's worst offseason, pointing to the combination of losing Hartenstein, giving a near max deal to OG Anunoby, and paying a heavy price to land Bridges from the Nets. He says, I'm not convinced they'll be better this year. I get that take. I mean, losing Hartenstein matters, and the money to OG and the price they gave to get Bridges, it does feel to me like a team. I feel weird at the end of July, putting a ceiling on a team like this where clearly Bridges could keep getting better and Brunson could keep getting better. But I think, can that team win the title? It's theoretically possible. I don't know that it's built any better than, say, the Mavericks. And nobody's saying the Mavericks are going to win the title last year. I know they got to the finals. They beat the Wolves. I get it. But, is there enough high level? Now, Luka could go complete supernova and they could win the title, but that's kind of how they got to the finals anyway. And on the Knicks side, you could get that from Brunson. You maybe eventually get it from Bridges. But this team is going to be pretty capped out with, I think, a ceiling of maybe conference finals. And are they ever going to be better than whatever comes out of the West? Now, obviously, the Celtics were better than what came out of the West this year. But are the Knicks ever going to get past the Celtics with this team? So I think that's interesting. The Nuggets being at the top because they lose KCP, they lose Reggie Jackson. Not all that surprising. Chicago, of course, traded away Caruso. They also traded DeMar DeRozan and didn't get any picks back. Which is and like it says here, they watched the Spurs get the best asset in the DeRozan deal, a pick swap from the Kings. Like Chicago, I mean, they've been on this list for years, right? They haven't had a good offseason in a long time, so that's not surprising. But I get the Nuggets being first. I think they were a little hamstrung with what they could do. We know, just as the Wolves were, but the Wolves didn't lose multiple rotation pieces. And now that's 2 off seasons in a row. The Nuggets lost multiple rotation pieces from a team that won the title 2 years ago. Minnesota only lost 1 and backfilled with with Joe Ingles, who we talked quite a bit about. We'll talk more about. And then also a lottery pick, a top 8 pick in the draft this year. So the Lakers getting a vote is kind of weird. Same with the Pistons. The Clippers 4. Yeah, fine. Losing Paul George. I get that. All right. Best move of the NBA offseason. This is the one I wanted to get to. Paul George signing with the Sixers, 6 votes. Caruso going to the Thunder, 5 votes. Jalen Brunson extending with the Knicks, 3 votes. KCP with the Magic got 2 votes, which I thought was interesting. Mikal Bridges being traded by the Nets was 1 vote, not getting traded to the Knicks, but getting traded by the Nets. And Rob Dillingham drafted by the Timberwolves, 1 vote. I'll just read what he says here. He doesn't say anything else about the Wolves, but it says after Philly got the votes for the best overall offseason, it wasn't a surprise. The George signing earned the most plaudits as the best individual move. Right behind was Caruso's deal for OKC, which saw one of the league's best perimeter defenders go to the Thunder without them giving up a single draft pick. An East scout said, quote, getting him, without giving up a pick is crazy. Brunson's massive discount on the extension also racked up votes, as did Caldwell Pope going to Orlando, giving the Magic a veteran wing defender and a quality shooter, something the team desperately needed. And a West Conference scout said the Magic hit the nail on the head for what they needed. I agree 100%. KCP's a great fit. I just thought it was funny that, this is a team that lost in the first round. So KCP signing isn't going to make them like a conference finals team. But anyway, Dillingham being drafted by the Wolves. No commentary there. I thought it was really interesting. And I've talked at length about it. Of course, the Dillingham move is supposed to check all the boxes. Backup point guard of the future, some bench juice and scoring and additional shooting. He does all of the above in one person. Now, if he plays like he did in the first 4 Summer League games, there's going to be those moments, certainly, but they're hoping he plays like he did in the 5th Summer League game. And, there's going to be bumps and bruises and peaks and valleys along the way, no doubt. But that was, and also, as we've talked about before, the creative way that Tim Conley added talent to this team without giving up anybody on the current roster or any of his, near-term picks, just giving up a pick 7 years out and a pick swap, 6 years out. So anyway. And then the worst move of the offseason, this is split in a bunch of different ways. The Bulls' part in the DeRozan trade is 3 votes. Sacramento's part in the DeRozan trade is 3 votes. Fantastic. Paul George signed by the Sixers, 3 votes. I talked already about how I'm pretty underwhelmed if I'm a Sixers fan. Denver losing KCP, 2 votes. Mikal Bridges traded to the Knicks, 2 votes. Pelicans trading for DeJounte Murray, 1 vote. Evan Mobley's extension in Cleveland, 1 vote. The Lakers in activity, 1. Hartenstein signed by OKC is 1. That's weird. Chicago's part in the Caruso Giddey deal, 1 vote. 10 different answers out of 18. And then it says, ironically, the voting was led by two different parts of the same trade. I agree 100%. Like, there's nothing else to say on that. And then a West Scout said George is on a decline, so giving him a 4-year max to a 34-year-old player is not great. Most surprising move of the offseason, the Bridges trade, 5 votes. PG 13, leaving LA, 3 votes. The Caruso Giddey trade, 2. And then 1 apiece for the Brunson extension, the Monty Williams firing, the KCP leaving Denver, Hartenstein to the Thunder, 1, DeRozan to Sacramento, 1, Tobias Harris to Detroit, 1, DeJounte Murray to New Orleans, 1 vote, and the Rob Dillingham vote Rob Dillingham trade got 1 vote. Last thing that I want to hit, the biggest trend of the NBA offseason, teams navigating to a luxury aprons got 12 votes, of course. Teams being stuck / general activity, which I would argue is related, that got 3 votes. And then there's some question about whether there'll be increased tanking, how effective the new CBA rules have been. Those are all split up, so there's not a whole lot, not a whole lot else to say there. So a couple of Dillingham mentions. And, the Wolves didn't really do a whole lot else besides the Ingles signing, which was kind of on the fringes. So interesting stuff. All right, let's close today by looking at the Wolves ownership situation. What's up next? I'll kind of walk through what we can expect to see there. We'll do all that here next. All right, so the last we heard about the Timberwolves ownership situation was, remember, at the beginning of May. It was May 1st, actually. There was mediation did not resolve the dispute between Glenn Taylor and the Mark Lowry, Alex Rodriguez group. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. If you're listening to this, you surely kind of have the cliff notes of it. But basically right now, Lowry and Rodriguez have 40% of the team. Glenn has most of the rest of it, and they're supposed to get another 40%. He's saying they didn't meet the terms. They're saying they did, and they're just waiting on NBA approval. So now they tried to go to mediation. That did not work. We knew that they were going to go to arbitration next, and I think they had said they'd set a date sometime in July. Well, that didn't mean it's happening in July. It means in July they'll set a future date, which is being reported by Nick Williams of the Star Tribune, that it will be early November. We don't have dates on it, but early November. The arbitration could last up to a week. And then after that, there's a ruling within 30 days. So call it, if it's the first or second week in November, we're talking about that lasting until middle November, and then a hearing, or excuse me, a decision from the 3-member arbitration panel not coming until likely mid-December. So by Christmas, we should know who the owners moving forward for the Timberwolves will be. And of course, we also know that there's an impact there on Tim Conley in the front office, because Tim Conley had an opt-out in his contract this summer. He chose to kick it forward a year, and the Wolves agreed to kick it forward a year because he wants to see what happens with this ownership situation. Of course, Lowry and Rodriguez were the driving forces, and of course, Glenn Taylor had to sign off on Tim Conley, essentially the trade, it wasn't a trade, but what they had to give him to get him from Denver, the scale of the deal that they made to sign Tim Conley to had to be agreed upon by Glenn Taylor. But it surely seems as though, and I don't think we can blame him, but Tim Conley wants to work for Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez in their group instead of Glenn Taylor. So next offseason, if Glenn Taylor wins, Tim Conley could leave. Or if nothing else, he might opt out either way and negotiate a new deal, even though he's got a crazy deal. He could negotiate an even bigger deal next summer, depending on how this turns out. So remember, the way this works is each side, the Lowry Rodriguez side and the Glenn Taylor side, gets to pick a judge for this panel, and then there's one that they mutually agree upon. And then there's this hearing for a week. And then after that, they get 30 days to come up with a solution for what's going to happen. So we won't know until mid-December, very likely. There's also an option, according to this article at Star Tribune, that the panel could rule that Lowry and Rodriguez did qualify for an extension based on all the boxes they checked back in March. And therefore, I guess I don't know if then the 90 days could start on December or whatever, or if the 90 days, if they would consider all of what's just happened part of the 90 days, and they now have the opportunity to, if they have the funds, buy the team from Taylor. And then it says Taylor must sell the team to them, or he would then pay monetary damages. So it seems as though either they end up to 80% with the ability to buy out Glenn Taylor by March of 25, which, believe it or not, is only, 8 months from now at this point. Or Taylor wins, retains the majority, and the other two, Laurie and Rodriguez, are stuck at 36%. Those are kind of the options. There are 3 different ways this could go. The biggest impact, of course, like, it's annoying that it's going to happen in season. I mean, we'll be 2-3 weeks in. The Wolves will hopefully be like, I don't know, 10-3 or something like that at that point. Of course, we don't have the schedule. I'm just throwing this out there. That'd be great. And then we get this ruling on the ownership situation. And that's not the news that any of us needs leading into the holidays there in the middle of the start of the basketball season. And then the longer term impact, of course, is Tim Conley and what that looks like, moving forward. Is Tim Conley still part of this front office come next summer? Really hope so. All right. That's all we got for you today here on the show. A reminder, Wednesday's show, we're going to do, we'll talk about what happened Tuesday in the Olympics. We'll preview the South Sudan matchup for Team USA. That game is Wednesday, I think afternoon. So we'll have all that for you in Wednesday's show. And remember, the YouTube show will post late, probably mid-evening. I don't know, mid-evening. Is that a term? Probably 9 or 10 p.m. Central on Tuesday night, and then the audio will post early on Wednesday. So we'll be doing that here over the next few weeks. We're still daily through the rest of this week, so we'll have a show Thursday talking about the post-game pod, essentially, from the Team USA game Wednesday. We'll do a show Friday to get you ready for Team USA over the weekend, and then they play again, I think, Sunday or Monday. So early next week, we'll do another post-game pod after USA Puerto Rico as well. We'll also, of course, keep an eye on all the other Wolves players playing in the Olympics. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. That's with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder, to make your second listen, the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, of course. We all know this. We're still daily for a reason. Now we've got the Olympics. There's always something going on. Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.